Hello, I'm Dr. Susan Langer from the Meridian Center for Holistic Medicine, and I'm here today to interview Gary Stuart, who is a certified facilitator of Bert Hellinger's family constellation work, and he has written a book called Many Hearts, One Soul, and it is an American perspective on the work of Bert Hellinger, edited by Gary Cole.
Yes.
So first, I would like to know who Bert Hellinger is and why we would be interested in this American perspective.
Yes. Bert Hellinger has developed a constellation modality to access the invisible dynamics and hidden realms in our family systems. So the life force is carried by energy between generations, and we have the opportunity to go into that energetic field of our ancestors to discover something that's not seen, that's propelling different things in our life in a possible positive way or negative way. Most people want to work on the negative ways because the positives are given. And in that, we use surrogates to access the hidden dynamics that's connected to some negative aspect appearing in someone's life. So what we're doing is really transforming the energy from something that's showing up as negative into something positive with unconditional love, which means we embrace it in its totality without judgment.
Great, well, thank you. I know that lots of people suffer from grief, for example.
Yes.
How would that be worked with this Hellinger work?
Well, what we find when we do the work, we have surrogates representing different elements of our ancestral past or our current relationship. And what we find more than not is there's a grief that was never expressed due to a traumatic event or sudden event, like a sudden heart attack. Everyone is in such shock that shock wave actually travels through time, through 5 generations, because it was too traumatic to experience during the time and place where it occurred. So what we find is that energy of that grief transfers to generations down the line to be dealt with. It can show up in our life as depression, it can show up in our life as fear, but yet it's still alive in the family system, kind of waiting to be transformed. Through this work, through the constellation process, we can transform it on the spot when it shows up.
Wow, okay. What about, we've got other issues here too.
Yes.
Rejection is a very common issue people come to me with, and they're very concerned, and they have done a lot of work with many therapists, and they still feel out of it or lost or different.
Well, with Hellinger's work, you also have to look at both sides of rejection. More than not, when I find people are complaining of that, they're actually the ones doing the rejecting.
Oh, my goodness.
So that's a transformational twist, and just seeing, well, if they're saying they feel rejected, who are they rejecting? There's always a surprise factor in that, and it turns out 9 out of 10 times, I've had many women come to me, I can't succeed in a relationship, the man is emotionally unavailable. So then we'll set up a constellation, either with her father, her grandfather, her mother, her father, whatever the case may have been. And almost 9 times out of 10, it was the women who were emotionally unavailable. And I'm not saying that to demonize women, but in most cases, the woman was suffering from a grief over a lost child and couldn't open up to her husband. Therefore, it appears that she was rejecting her husband, but she was so consumed by grief over a child loss. Then the child reads that as reject the father, and then they start rejecting men in their life, blaming men for the grief their mother felt over a child loss, and it creates a cascading snowball effect.
Wow. So you could spend years in therapy worrying about being rejected, but there's this whole hidden dynamic.
Yes, absolutely, and that's where we go. Luckily, we have psychotherapy and Western medicine to take care of many things. We don't pretend to be psychotherapists or anything. We're more shamanic in nature, that we're going into the energy of the invisible dynamics that are creating behaviors in our life. So I tell people, psychology is like keeping you on the raft, floating on the river of life. What we're doing is we're diving in the water to see what's in the water under the raft. And in that, we see the negative dynamic where they might have rejection issues, grief, guilt, whatever the case may be. And we're kind of cleaning out the pollution in the water so that the raft can sail smoothly rather than being bogged down.
That's a great analogy. Okay, so let's see some other issues. Yes, a big issue, very common, unfortunately, is family secrets.
Yes, and there's
How
lots
does
of
that run people's lives?
What we find is that the client will either tell us the secret or I know of this secret in my family, but during the constellation process, we see the secret was actually a cover-up. And the interesting thing is when the secret's good to have that information, but when we start to use the surrogates and track the feeling, the energetic feeling of what the secret represents, we find that the secret was actually a diversion from the real truth. So the great thing about the constellation process is we get to the real truth that the secret was created for. And in that is the release. We've released the energy that created the secret. The secret is not a secret anymore. And sometimes it's a much darker secret than anyone had realized was in existence.
Wow, so give me an example of some of these secrets.
Okay, they can get pretty heavy. I'm trying to think of one. Last night we were doing a constellation, and a woman was working on her mother issue. Her and her mother are always fighting. So we tracked back, her mother wasn't there, we tracked back through different surrogates to be her mother, her grandmother, her great-grandmother. It showed that her great or great-grandmother was a victim of incest with her father, and actually was impregnated by her father. Well, the client, who doesn't even know these people because they've been dead for almost 100 years, but it was so real, and it was very important to state the truth, that I have my father's baby. And it ended up showing, now number one, the family went on despite this trauma. The client was there in the room despite it. She didn't even know about it, but it was so real to all the women in the room, and that kept women afraid of men for 4 generations. Mm-hmm. So that initial trauma, not to endorse it or anything like that, created a mistrust of men. And by the end of the constellation, all the men were sitting down because the women really couldn't be emotionally available to men. They were kind of judging them in a superior way, but all the women were left standing. And it really showed that it was more of a matriarchal system, and that the women really were the powerful ones in this family system. And what was amazing is the client saw her mother in a totally different light. And she was talking, my mother rejects me, blah, 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 blah. And that fight that was going on just went back 5 generations. It was really a fight between a great-grandmother and a great-grandfather.
Yes, yes, wow. Other secrets might be, hidden murders in the family, or hidden affairs, or hidden children.
Now, yes, absolutely, absolutely. Those are some of the bigger secrets. Now, what we do find with the work is everyone belongs in a family system. Well, if a father has a secret lover and no one knows about it, that woman still is represented by one of the children of the father's immediate family, even if it's a secret relationship. So we find everyone is included energetically in the family system, and everyone belongs, even if it's an illicit affair. And that creates confusion in the children. They don't realize. So say that father has another child, let's say out of wedlock, while he's married to someone else. Well, that adds another person to the family system. So the person that thinks they're the firstborn is actually the secondborn. We're giving a place for that illicit relationships child, and we're giving the child its proper place as number 2 when it thinks it's number 1.
Yes.
So we also find something very interesting with the work is that a lot of people get married. Some marriages are arranged. It's not for love. The parents wanted one family to join another family, but they really love somebody else. That will create a break in loving relationships because the family's not allowed to marry who they love. And the other thing we find is that that woman always has to be represented in the family. So the children will either take on the role of that missing woman, or the true love. People will marry a person and have a family, but their true love was from someone who came before. And it's almost like what we discover in Hellinger's work, when the human heart opens up and loves for the first time, sometimes no other love can match that love. And even though they marry and have 10 children, their heart was always with someone else who's not even in the family system, who no one knows about. So that would be a big family secret that people don't even realize is a secret. my mother or father loved someone else, and yet they married and I received my life from their union. But at the same time, those invisible people are part of the family system as well. So we give them a place in the family as the first love. So the child doesn't have to carry the behavior or memory of that person who's missing.
Yeah, and then that secret gets resolved. And
yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yes. Okay. What about relationships? How do you work with what happens?
Well, we're talking a lot about relationships, and what people don't realize, one classic example, I was demonstrating this at a health food store. A woman was working on career issues. I can't get a job. I'm almost on general welfare, and she says, okay. So I said, okay, set up you in career. So as a facilitator, we're in tune with the invisible energy. The more sensitive we are to the field, I felt that somehow, I didn't even know this woman, but I felt there were two people missing. And I just whispered to her, and I said, did you either have 2 abortions or do you have 2 children? Or that you adopted out? Any case, I just felt two babies were missing somehow. And she said, no, I had 2 abortions. So here she's working on career issues rather. And so I added 2 people to be those babies. And to show you the holistic aspect of what we had, I added they came from different fathers. So she had 2 abortions with 2 different men, and she was looking at her career in front of her. And so we had her whole family system. Here's a single woman who's actually a family of 5. 2 men, 2 babies, and her. And looking at her career, wondering why everything's a mess, to the point of, starvation and general welfare, and almost being homeless. She was that close. And it was a health food store. It was a great demonstration. 2 weeks later, she calls me after that, and she got the best paying job of her life, $40 an hour, to be a graphic designer, which was her true career. And look at, by including the invisible dynamics of her true family, even though she didn't marry those gentlemen, even though the babies didn't have a full incarnation with her as their mother, outside of being a fetus that was aborted, her life was complete, and she could move forward without grief or guilt to punish herself for what she had done. So we completed her field with the true people that belong in the field, and her success came right away in less than 2 weeks.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it really was.
So I was going to ask you next about financial or career issues, but that's a great example.
Yeah, that's one example. I'll use my own sister was having financial problems, and she still is. That's kind of her fate this lifetime. And so we set up my own family system and her with money and what was going on. And the people that were brought in as career and money, we brought in 3 aspects, career, money, and I believe, and they all collapsed on the floor. Mm-hmm. And she was standing around looking at the floor at who I knew were a sister who died, my mother and father, and she hadn't said goodbye to any of them. Mm. And basically the consolation was her just saying goodbye, sending her regards, whatever, and it was a very sweet, sweet moment. And the irony for her, in her case, 2 weeks later, on my dead sister's birthday, who she was saying goodbye to, she became a contributing writer to the Huffington Post.
Wow.
And it's like, why would that happen on my dead sister's birthday in a constellation she was saying goodbye to? I felt that was a message from my sister on the other side. Go ahead, don't suffer with grief here. Get on with your life,
Yes.
And it was just great. So she has her own blog now, and many stories on Huffington Post regarding the Iraq War.
That's a great story.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yes. It's been an honor and pleasure.
So we have some other questions we're going to be asking you.
Okay.
How does this process help the client?
Well, it unentangles them. One of Hellinger's big discoveries that we get entangled with things that really aren't our business. So with that, we're trying to straighten out a trauma or drama from our great-grandparents' life or grandparents' life that actually is none of our business. But we do it out of love. So with the process, we see that we can disentangle the client from a drama that they're embroiled in that really is another generation's business. So we can disengage them from trying to fix their ancestry and just accept and enjoy the life they've been given.
Okay. I know that when somebody comes to a constellation work, or they do it long distance, there are certain questions that you asked.
Yes.
Now, I think they're in this book.
Yes, they are. Yeah,
They are?
yeah. I put them in Many Hearts, One Soul. So this book is used as also a teaching guide to get you to think systemically and to just think about your own family system and your place in it. And some of the generational questions are designed to have you intellectually, at least on paper anyway, think about these issues and write it down so that if you ever do decide to do a constellation, you'll know kind of your family's history from a different level. What is your place in your family? Were any children miscarried or aborted before you were born, after you were born? What happened in your grandmother's life? What happened in your grandfather's life? And health issues, also generational health issues. Is there a lineage of cancer? Is there a lineage of breast cancer? I can't tell you how many women we've worked with in their ancestry there was breast cancer, and 9 out of 10 times it shows that there was a baby that didn't get nurtured because it was miscarried or aborted. So then that begs the question, is part of the scourge of breast cancer an energetic side effect of women having abortions? But I'm still pro-choice, but we see that there's much more complicated entanglements even between mother and child if the child's life is cut short. So I still remain pro-choice and firmly for Roe versus Wade because it is a medical procedure, but we start to see that the incomplete love can lead to disease in the body.
Yeah.
So the movement of lifting a child at your birth up and hugging it is stopped with an abortion, but that still goes on in the body. And does the body react by manifesting cancer in one of the breasts? So it's just interesting. I wish there were medical studies done in that aspect, the emotional, spiritual aspects of that particular disease tied to abortion.
Great, thank you.